My wife claimed men think they own wives. I quietly stepped back from duties until the weight of freedom finally shattered her narrative. I think they own you. Those words came floating through our bedroom door while I was grabbing my phone charger. My wife was on speaker with her girlfriends, and apparently, I was the main topic of conversation. I froze, not because I was eavesdropping on purpose, but because hearing your name in a conversation you're not supposed to hear hits different. She was painting this picture of me as some controlling, possessive husband who apparently thought I owned her. According to her version of events, I was this overbearing guy who had to approve everything she did. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, the guy who worked extra hours so she could pursue her hobbies, the same guy who had never once told her she couldn't do something. But somehow, in her narrative to her friends, asking "What time will you be home?" became controlling behavior. Wanting to discuss major purchases together became financial domination. I listened as she described how I apparently monitored her spending. Monitored? I was the one who had set up her separate account so she could have financial freedom. But when I mentioned we should probably talk before dropping $2,000 on a designer bag, suddenly I became the villain in her story. Her friend chimed in with the classic, "Girl, you need to set boundaries." Boundaries, as if I was some kind of prison warden, instead of the husband who did the grocery shopping, handled the bills, and made sure we had a functional household. But sure, let's call basic partnership ownership. What really got me was how she twisted every considerate gesture. When I cooked dinner, I was apparently being passive-aggressive about her not cooking enough. When I didn't cook, I was lazy and expecting her to handle everything. There was literally no winning scenario in the version of reality she'd created for her friends. She went on about how men these days think they can just claim women like property. The whole conversation felt like some kind of performance, like she was competing with her friends to see who had the most oppressive husband. The problem was, her husband wasn't oppressive at all. I stood there holding my phone charger, realizing I'd been living in a completely different marriage than she had. In my version, we were partners making decisions together. In her version, I was some kind of controlling overlord ruining her life with my terrible suggestions and basic adult conversations. The call ended with promises to show him who's really in charge, and plans for a girls' night where she could remember what freedom feels like. Freedom from what, exactly? From having someone who actually gave a damn about our shared life? I walked back to the living room and sat down, staring at the wall. 5 years of marriage, and I'd apparently been cast as the antagonist in my own love story. Every time I thought I was being a good husband, she was filing it away as evidence of my controlling nature. The worst part wasn't even the betrayal of hearing how she really talked about me. It was the realization that she genuinely believed her own narrative. This wasn't just venting to friends, she had convinced herself that basic partnership was oppression. I could have stormed back there and confronted her right then. I could have demanded explanations and started a fight that would prove her point about my controlling behavior. But something told me to wait, to watch, to see just how deep this went. Because if she really thought I was trying to own her, maybe it was time I stopped caring about what happened to what we supposedly owned together. If partnership looked like possession to her, perhaps it was time to show her what actual independence felt like. The next morning, she acted like nothing had happened, made coffee, kissed my cheek, asked about my day, all while secretly harboring this completely fictional version of our marriage where I was the bad guy. I smiled back, but inside something had shifted, not into anger, into curiosity. I wanted to see just how far this narrative had infected our relationship, how many of our normal interactions she'd been reframing as control issues. Because if I was really the controlling husband she described to her friends, then clearly she needed to experience what life looked like without any input from me at all. The next few days became a masterclass in selective storytelling. I started paying attention to how she operated, and the pattern was disturbing. She'd turned completely normal interactions into episodes of oppression for her friends. Tuesday morning, she asked if I thought the expensive yoga membership was worth it. I said it seemed great if it made her happy, but maybe we should look at our budget first since we had the car payment coming up. Reasonable, right? That same evening, I heard her on the phone. He basically said I can't join because we can't afford it. Like, why am I even asking permission to spend my own money? Her own money? We had joint accounts. Everything was our money until it became convenient to play the victim. Wednesday, she wanted to redecorate the living room. I suggested we do it together over the weekend since I actually enjoyed that stuff. By Thursday, her version to the group chat was, He won't let me change anything without his approval. I feel like I'm living in his house, not our house. I watched her thumbs fly across her phone screen, crafting these alternate reality messages while sitting right next to me on the couch. The audacity was almost impressive. She'd taken 5 years of partnership and turned it into a prison sentence with me as the warden who apparently never let her do anything. The breaking point in my patience came Friday evening. She was making dinner and I offered to help. She said, "No thanks, I've got it handled." 20 minutes later, she was texting, cooking dinner alone again while he watches TV. Apparently helping me means telling me how to do everything better. I wasn't even watching TV, I was reading. And I'd literally just offered to help. But in her world, being told no thanks somehow transformed into being an absent, demanding husband. Saturday brought the real revelation. She was going shopping with her sister and asked if I needed anything. I said maybe some of that coffee I liked if she happened to see it. Standard married couple communication, right? Wrong. That afternoon, I overheard her call to her mother. He gave me a whole list of things to pick up while I'm out. I can't even go shopping without him finding ways to control what I'm doing. A whole list? I'd mentioned coffee one item, but somehow my casual if you see it had become this demanding list of errands I was forcing on her. The psychological warfare was incredible. She'd twisted our entire relationship dynamic to paint herself as this oppressed wife dealing with an impossible husband. Every considerate gesture became control. Every normal conversation became manipulation. I realized she wasn't just venting to friends. She was building a case, creating this narrative where she was the long-suffering victim of my apparently terrible behavior. The scary part was watching her believe her own story. Sunday morning, she mentioned wanting to take a weekend trip with her girlfriends next month. I said it sounded fun and asked where they were thinking of going. Basic husband question, right? She got this look on her face like I'd just demanded her birth certificate and 3 references. "I'm just asking because I'm interested," I said, sensing the shift. "Right. You're just asking," she replied with a tone that said she didn't believe me at all. That evening, sure enough, the phone rang. He interrogated me about the trip today. Asked all these questions about where we're going and what we're doing. I felt like I was being investigated. Interrogated? I'd asked where they were going, one question born from genuine interest in my wife's life, but she'd filed it under controlling behavior faster than I could blink. I sat there watching her pace around the kitchen while painting me as some kind of suspicious detective to her friends. The woman I'd been married to for 5 years was creating a fictional version of me that bore no resemblance to reality. The final straw came when she started getting creative with her stories. She told her sister I'd gotten upset when she bought new clothes last week. I'd complimented the dress and told her it looked great, but apparently not being upset about her purchases was somehow still wrong. I'd been living with a woman who was slowly but systematically rewriting our entire marriage to make me the villain. Every normal interaction was evidence of my controlling nature. Every question was an interrogation. Every suggestion was a demand. The most disturbing part was realizing she genuinely believed this narrative she'd created. This wasn't just exaggeration for sympathy points. She'd convinced herself that my normal husband behavior was actually oppressive. That night, as she scrolled through her phone, probably crafting the next episode of My Controlling Husband, I made a decision. If she was so convinced that my involvement in our life together was actually control and ownership, then maybe it was time to see how she handled things when I stopped being involved at all. If caring was controlling, then clearly the solution was to stop caring. If partnership was possession, then perhaps she needed to experience what actual independence looked like. If she wanted to be free from my terrible input on everything, then tomorrow I'd start giving her exactly what she claimed to want. No more questions, no more suggestions, no more involvement in decisions. She wanted to paint me as controlling. Fine, let's see how she handled a husband who controlled absolutely nothing. Monday morning arrived with perfect timing for my little experiment. She announced she was planning a girls' night out Thursday with her work friends. But instead of just telling me, she made this whole theatrical production about it. "I'm going out Thursday night," she said, watching my face carefully, "with the girls from work." "Sounds fun," I replied, not looking up from my coffee. She waited. I could feel her staring, expecting some kind of pushback or interrogation. "We'll probably be out pretty late," she pushed further, like really late. "Okay," I said, taking another sip. "And we're going to that new place downtown, the one with the cocktails." "Cool." I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. "Have a great time." I left her standing there, clearly frustrated that her dramatic announcement hadn't triggered the controlling husband response she was expecting. No questions about who was going, what time she'd be home, or whether she needed a ride, just complete indifference. That evening I heard her on the phone with her friend. It's so weird. I told him about Thursday night, and he barely reacted. Like, he didn't even ask what time I'd be back. Then came the kicker. I think he's being passive-aggressive. Like, now he's pretending not to care to make some kind of point. I almost laughed out loud. When I showed interest, I was controlling. When I didn't show interest, I was being passive-aggressive. There literally wasn't a winning move in her game. Tuesday brought another test. She asked what I wanted for dinner, clearly expecting me to have an opinion she could later twist into controlling behavior. Whatever you feel like making, I said. But what do you want? I'm easy. You choose. You always have preferences. Not today, your call entirely. She made pasta and spent the entire meal trying to get me to express an opinion about it. Was it too salty? Did I like this sauce? Should she make something different next time? I just smiled and said everything was great. Whatever she wanted to do was fine with me. That night, another phone call. He's being so weird lately. Like he won't give his opinion on anything. Yesterday, I asked what he wanted for dinner and he just said, whatever. It's like he's checked out or something. Wednesday escalated things beautifully. She mentioned wanting to buy a new coffee table, clearly fishing for the financial discussion she could later paint as controlling behavior. Sounds good, I said. But shouldn't we talk about price and style and where it would go? You've got good taste. I trust your judgment. But what if it's expensive? It's your call. She stood there looking confused, holding her phone like she was planning to text her friends about my latest terrible behavior, but couldn't figure out what to complain about. Thursday night arrived, and she was clearly confused about how to handle the girls' night narrative. She'd built it up as this big declaration of independence, but I hadn't given her anything to rebel against. She got dressed and ready, making pointed comments about how late they might be and how they probably wouldn't stick to their original plans. I nodded along and told her to have fun. As she headed for the door, she turned back. You're really okay with this? Why wouldn't I be? You usually ask more questions. You're an adult. You don't need my permission or approval for anything. She left looking more confused than triumphant. I settled in for a peaceful evening, knowing exactly how this was going to play out. Sure enough, around midnight, my phone buzzed with a text. Still out. Don't wait up. Like I was sitting around, worried about her curfew. I was already asleep when she got home around 2 o'clock. The next morning, she seemed almost disappointed that I wasn't upset or demanding explanations about her night out. How was your evening? She asked over coffee. Great. Watched a movie. Went to bed early. How was girls' night? It was good. That's nice. She waited for more questions. Who was there? What did they do? Where did they go? I just drank my coffee and scrolled through my phone. That afternoon, I overheard the most telling phone call yet. I don't know what's wrong with him. I stayed out until 2 last night and he didn't even seem to care. Like, he didn't ask any questions or anything. It's like he's completely lost interest in me. The irony was beautiful. When I cared about her activities, I was controlling. When I stopped caring, I was neglectful. She'd created a no-win scenario and was now experiencing the logical conclusion of her own complaints. The best part was listening to her friend's response. Maybe he's finally giving you the space you wanted. But I didn't want him to stop caring completely. And there it was, the truth she couldn't admit to herself. She didn't actually want independence. She wanted the drama of feeling controlled without the reality of being controlled. She wanted to play the victim while still having a husband who cared about every detail of her life. She'd painted herself into a corner with her own narrative. After weeks of complaining about my controlling behavior, she couldn't exactly demand that I go back to asking questions and showing interest without admitting she'd been wrong about everything. The foundation of her victim story was cracking, and we were only getting started. By the weekend, I decided to take my hands-off approach to the next level. If she wanted to experience life without a controlling husband, then she was about to get the full package. Saturday morning, she asked about our plans for the day. What do you want to do? I'm good with whatever you decide, I said, not looking up from my book. But don't you have any ideas? Nope. You're the planner now. She stood there for a moment, clearly expecting me to suggest something she could either agree with or complain about later. When I offered nothing, she eventually wandered off to figure out our day herself. An hour later, she was back. So I was thinking we could go to that farmer's market and then maybe check out the new furniture store. Sounds good. You don't want to suggest anything else? I'm sure whatever you pick will be perfect. The confusion on her face was priceless. She'd gotten so used to our normal dynamic where we discussed options together, but now she was getting exactly what she'd told her friends she wanted: complete decision-making freedom. At the farmer's market, she kept trying to get my input. Should we get the organic apples or the regular ones? I shrugged and said both looked fine. What about flowers for the kitchen? Whatever you think looks nice. I could see her getting frustrated with my complete lack of opinions. Every decision, no matter how small, was landing entirely on her shoulders. By the time we got to the furniture store, she was practically begging for my input. "This couch is nice, right?" she asked, sitting on a sectional. "If you like it. But what do you think? I think you have excellent taste. But would you be comfortable on it? I'm sure I'll adjust to whatever you choose." The salesperson was watching this exchange with obvious confusion. Here was a couple shopping for furniture, but only one person seemed interested in making decisions. We left empty-handed because she couldn't commit to anything without my input, which I was no longer providing. That evening, another phone call to her friends. "We went furniture shopping today, and he literally wouldn't give an opinion on anything. Like, I'm trying to pick out a couch for both of us, and he just kept saying, 'Whatever you want.'" The response was predictable. Isn't that what you wanted? For him to stop being so controlling about everything? Well, yeah, but... And there was that, but again, the crack in her logic getting wider. Sunday brought the financial dimension to my experiment. She wanted to discuss our budget for the month, something that had always been a collaborative effort. But since collaboration was apparently control, I handed her all the financial responsibility. "Here's the account information," I said, sliding her a notebook with all our bills and due dates. "You're in charge now." "What do you mean I'm in charge?" "You handle the budget, pay the bills, make all the financial decisions. Complete independence. But we always do this together." That was the old controlling me. "New me doesn't interfere with your financial freedom." She stared at the notebook like it was a bomb. "But what if I mess something up?" "I'm sure you won't. And if you do, that's part of independence, right? Learning from your own decisions." Monday morning, she was already feeling the pressure. She spent an hour trying to figure out which bills were priorities and how much we could spend on groceries, things I'd been handling smoothly for years that suddenly seemed overwhelming when they were entirely her responsibility. "This is really complicated," she said, looking stressed. "You've got this," I replied cheerfully. "Independence is empowering, remember?" By Tuesday, she was making her first mistakes. She forgot to pay the electric bill on time and got hit with a late fee. She overspent on groceries and then realized we were short for the car payment. Small problems, but they were her problems now. "Maybe you could just help me figure out this budget thing," she suggested Wednesday morning. "That would be controlling of me," I said with a smile. "You wanted financial freedom, and I respect that too much to interfere." She looked like she wanted to argue, but how could she? For weeks she'd been telling her friends that my involvement in our finances was controlling behavior. Now she was stuck living with the consequences of her own narrative. Thursday brought the domestic responsibilities shift. She asked if I could pick up groceries on my way home from work. "I think you should handle the shopping from now on," I said. "That way you get exactly what you want without any input from me." "But you're going right past the store." "True, but shopping is a personal choice. I wouldn't want to impose my controlling influence on your grocery decisions." She ended up making a special trip to the store, spending gas, money, and time she didn't have all, because she couldn't ask her controlling husband to help without admitting her whole narrative was false. Friday evening, she was exhausted from handling everything alone: bills, shopping, meal planning, household decisions, all the things she'd taken for granted when we shared them. "I feel like I'm doing everything by myself," she complained. "That's independence," I said supportively. "You're proving you don't need anyone controlling your decisions." That night, I heard the most interesting phone call yet. I asked him to help with some stuff this week, and he keeps saying it would be controlling. Like, I can't even get him to pick up groceries without him making it about control and independence. Her friend asked the obvious question. "But isn't that what you wanted, for him to stop being so involved in everything?" I didn't think it would be this hard. "Maybe you should talk to him about finding a balance." How can I do that without admitting I was wrong about everything? And there it was. She'd painted herself so deeply into the victim corner that she couldn't ask for help without dismantling her entire narrative. She was trapped by her own story, and the only way out required admitting she'd been wrong about me from the beginning. 2 weeks into my complete hands-off approach, the cracks in her independent woman facade were becoming full-blown fractures. She was drowning in the responsibility she'd never realized I was quietly handling. And the best part was watching her try to maintain her victim narrative while everything fell apart around her. The first major disaster came on a Tuesday. She'd been managing our joint account for 2 weeks and missed the mortgage payment deadline, not just late, completely missed it. I found the notice on our kitchen counter when I got home from work. "We got a notice from the bank," I said, holding up the letter. Her face went pale. "I thought I paid that." "Apparently not. Late fee is pretty steep too. Can you just handle it? Call them and explain?" "That would be controlling of me," I said calmly. "This is your area of independence now. I'm sure you can work it out." She spent 3 hours on the phone with the bank, dealing with automated systems and transfer fees, all problems that would have been avoided if she just paid attention to the due date I'd been managing for years. Thursday brought the grocery budget disaster. She'd overspent so badly in the first week that we were eating rice and beans by the weekend. When she asked if I could contribute some money for real groceries, I reminded her that would undermine her financial independence. "But we need food," she said, staring into our nearly empty refrigerator. "Absolutely. Good thing you're in charge of the grocery budget. I don't have any money left." That's a tough lesson in budgeting. Very educational. She ended up calling her mother to borrow money for groceries. The humiliation was written all over her face, but she couldn't ask me for help without admitting that my controlling financial oversight had actually been keeping us fed. The domestic front was equally entertaining. Without my input on meal planning, she was making terrible decisions. Monday night takeout because she forgot to plan dinner. Tuesday burnt chicken because she wouldn't ask for cooking advice. Wednesday cereal because she was too tired to figure out anything else. "Maybe you could suggest some easy meal ideas," she said Thursday morning. "I wouldn't want to control your culinary creativity," I replied, making myself a proper breakfast. "I'm not a good cook when I'm stressed." Stress is part of independence. You're learning valuable life skills. By Friday, she was surviving on delivery apps and frozen dinners, wondering why everything felt so much harder than it used to be. The social consequences were the most beautiful part. Her friends started noticing the change in her stories. Instead of complaining about her controlling husband, she was now complaining about everything she had to handle alone. "He won't help me with anything anymore," she told her sister during a weekend call. "Like I asked him to pick up milk yesterday, and he said that would be controlling. Isn't that what you wanted, though? For him to stop being so involved?" "Well, yes, but not like this. So what exactly did you want?" And there was the question she couldn't answer. She wanted me to care without caring, to be involved without being controlling, to take responsibility without having authority. She wanted the benefits of partnership while maintaining the narrative of oppression. The breaking point came the following week when she tried to handle a plumbing issue alone. The kitchen sink was backing up, and instead of asking for help, she decided to prove her independence by fixing it herself. I came home to find water everywhere, the cabinet under the sink torn apart, and her sitting on the floor crying with a wrench in her hand. "Need some help?" I asked. "You'll just tell me I should have done it differently. Actually, I was going to offer to call a plumber, but that might be too controlling." "Stop saying that." "Saying what? That controlling thing? I know what you're doing. I'm respecting your independence. Isn't that what you wanted?" She looked at me with pure frustration. "I wanted you to care about me, not completely check out. But caring was controlling, remember? You made that very clear to your friends. That's not... I didn't mean..." "You didn't mean what? That you wanted me to stop being involved in our life together? Because that's exactly what you told everyone." She couldn't respond because she knew I was right. Every complaint she'd made to her friends was now coming true, and she was discovering that the reality of independence was nothing like the fantasy she'd been selling. The water continued dripping around us as she sat there, finally understanding that all the things she'd labeled as controlling behavior were actually the foundation of our partnership. The financial planning, the shared decisions, the collaborative problem-solving. It wasn't depression. It was marriage. "I don't know what I'm doing," she finally admitted. "I know," I said. "But asking for help would mean admitting that my involvement wasn't actually controlling, wouldn't it?" She looked up at me, realizing she was trapped by her own narrative. To get back the partnership she actually wanted, she'd have to admit she'd been wrong about everything. And that conversation was going to require a level of humility she wasn't sure she was ready for. The final reckoning came exactly 3 weeks after my independence experiment began. She'd maxed out her credit card trying to manage expenses she didn't understand, missed another bill payment, and was facing the reality that she'd created a financial mess that would take months to fix. Saturday morning, she found me reading on the couch and sat down across from me with that look people get when they're about to surrender. "We need to talk," she said. "About what?" "About this, whatever this is. This thing you're doing." "I'm not doing anything. I'm giving you exactly what you said you wanted." "No, you're not. You're being spiteful." I looked up from my book. "Spiteful by respecting your independence? You know that's not what I meant when I said those things." "Do I?" "Because you were pretty clear to your friends about how controlling I was, how I made you feel owned, how you needed freedom from my terrible involvement in our life." Her face went red. "You heard those conversations. Every word. For weeks. So, this whole thing has been some kind of punishment." "Not punishment, education. You painted me as this controlling husband who treated you like property. I figured the best way to prove you wrong was to show you what life actually looks like when I don't care about what happens to our shared responsibilities." She was quiet for a long moment. "The mortgage payment, the groceries, the budget. All the things you said I was controlling you about. Turns out they needed to be managed by someone. I know, okay? I know I messed up. It's not about messing up. It's about understanding what partnership actually means versus the story you created for your friends. I was just venting. Everyone complains about their husbands sometimes. There's a difference between venting and rewriting reality. You turned every considerate gesture into evidence of oppression, every collaborative decision into control. You made me the villain in a story where I was actually trying to be a good husband." She started crying, which was exactly what I'd expected. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. But it did go that far. And now you want me to go back to caring about our shared life without ever acknowledging that caring wasn't actually controlling. What do you want me to say?" "Want you to understand that when I asked about your plans, I wasn't monitoring you, I was interested in your life. When we discussed purchases together, I wasn't controlling your money, I was being a responsible partner. When I offered help or suggestions, I wasn't treating you like property, I was trying to share the load. I understand that now." "Do you? Because 3 weeks ago you were telling your friends how oppressed you felt. Now you're upset that I stopped being involved. Which version is true?" She looked at me with genuine realization dawning. I wanted to feel important to the group. They all had these stories about difficult husbands, and I felt like I had to contribute something. "So you invented problems that didn't exist." "I guess I did. And now you've experienced what your life actually looks like without a partner who cares about shared responsibilities. Was it everything you thought it would be?" "No," she whispered. "It was terrible. Here's what's going to happen going forward. Either you want a real partnership where we both contribute and collaborate, or you want to be truly independent and handle everything yourself. But you don't get to have partnership while calling it control when it suits your narrative. I want the partnership. Then you need to stop talking about our marriage like I'm some kind of oppressor to your friends, to your family, to anyone. Because if I hear you painting elbow me as controlling again, you'll get exactly the independence you claim to want." She nodded, understanding that the game was over. "What about the mess I made with the bills? We'll fix it together, like partners do. But this was a one-time educational experience. Next time you decide I'm too involved in our life, remember these 3 weeks." She agreed. And slowly we started rebuilding what she'd nearly destroyed with her fictional narrative. But the lesson was permanent. She'd learned the difference between partnership and control, between caring and ownership, between being involved and being oppressive. And I learned that sometimes the best way to prove your value is to temporarily withdraw it. She thought men believe they own women. So I showed her what it looked like when this man stopped caring about ownership entirely.